Grab your cup of coffee. Sit down for a story. Let's all go exploring. Making it after 40. Making it after 40. Making it after 40.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Making It After 40 podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Rodriguez. I am an actor and writer who is still trying to make it after the age of 40. On this show, we explore what it means to be an artist trying to make it as a middle-aged person. This week, my guest is Chad Damiani. I met Chad at Second City Hollywood when I came across the hilarious and brilliant show Jetso and Ithamar. Chad is a clown and has dedicated his creative career to clowning. But before he became a clown, he had a career as a screenwriter, and before that, a career as an announcer for wrestling. This episode is so good. I cannot tell you how excited I am about this episode. As you'll hear, Chad has lived a lot of life in his 50 years, and so he brings to the table passion, energy, wisdom, and just general good vibes. You can see this in his performances, in the way he lives his life, his attitude, and in the way he engages in this conversation. I can't say enough good things about Chad, and I'm sure he'll get a kick out of that. He'll appreciate that. But seriously, I was so honored to have this conversation. I'm a big fan of Chad's work, and then to have him bring the energy that he did to this conversation was really rewarding. So please sit back and really give your attention to this exciting conversation with Chad Damiani. Okay, so today I have Chad, and let me want to make sure I say your last name right. Damiani?
That's right. It's perfect.
Hey! I listened to the opening of your podcast to make sure I was getting it right.
I like how you very specified. I listened to the opening.
Yes,
then I got out of there. Then I got out of there real fast.
because I ran out of time and I didn't have time to listen to the whole thing. But I need to. I was looking at your materials. I was like, why haven't I listened to this before? This seems like an awesome podcast. So yeah. So Chad is a clown. He is, and you can tell me what I get wrong, but you have a wrestling background. Mm-hmm. You're an entertainer, improviser, and you also have a podcast now about clowning.
Yeah, and although I don't really identify it as anymore, I spent years and years as my main gig was screenwriting.
I was going to ask you about that because on your IMDb, there's a lot of writing credits.
Yeah, no, it's so wild. I just turned 50 last year, and I spent
not 64 like you always post on Instagram.
Look, it's a great trick if you want to post some thirst traps. And you say it's your birthday, then it seems like you're just trying to show that you're doing pretty okay. But if you just post thirst traps, you look like a monster. So I have, and if you say you're 64, you look like you're really doing great. If you're 50,
yeah. That's hilarious. So yeah, you just turned 50. And, you said, and
yeah, and I was looking back, I'm like, oh wow, I guess around 2003, I kind of started on that screenwriting journey, and I didn't really step away from it until 2019, and I'd say about 12 of those years I was working, and a couple of years on the front end, I was trying to make a name for myself, and a couple of years on the back end, I wasn't getting the hint that I wasn't working anymore. Yeah. But yeah, it's like, oh wow, as you get older, you can have these huge, long chapters in your life that exist. I actually love that element of getting older.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not just like, oh, I spent a summer in Atlanta. That's what you can do when you're like 25. I spent a summer in Atlanta. But yeah, it's looking back, it's like, it's hard for me to believe that, that was my entire existence. And then I found improv while I was a screenwriter.
Yeah.
And so then that was kind of like a night thing. And when we met, when I was doing Jetso and Ithamar, still working as a screenwriter, but I'd become very focused on, sort of clown and comedy. And so all day writing, taking meetings, and then all night kind of creating work that spoke to me more and and trying to find a balance. But the truth is it's really hard to find a balance of dedicating yourself wholly to two different artistic pursuits. I think you can do like parent and writer, or like cyclist and poet, but like when it comes to like having, there's only so much creativity in the tank. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good point. I find myself struggling with that right now because my focus has been acting for so long, and well, acting with distractions of like, I had a whole career as a property manager because that's what I needed to do to make ends meet. And it would pull me, I got kind of sucked into that, the stress of all that. And once I was in a position that was less stressful and I had a little bit of mental freedom, I was, able to get back into training. And so since probably about 2014 or so, I've been, actively pursuing acting again. But I'm starting to find, like, I've also been trying to write, and it's hard to do that and then also now do this podcast. And so since I started this podcast, I'm still auditioning, but I'm not I'm not putting so much weight on the acting.
Yeah.
I kind of would rather maybe focus on the writing, and I'm trying to figure out what's my balance. And like, I'm questioning, well, should I be like focusing on acting at all? Should I just be doing the podcasting and writing? Or I don't know.
And there's no right answer. Like,
yeah,
there's just, I would say where I've landed is I really just try to do things that bring me the most joy. And I mean, it can sound foolish saying that. And I also know that anyone who says that is coming from some position of privilege, some kind of privilege, like it varies. Like for me, privilege looks like, I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have debt. I made money.
Yeah.
I made a lot of money for me, not like a lot of money in the grand scheme, in two different periods of my life. So I have a little money saved. So because I have these advantages right now, my focus is solely like, I don't do anything that doesn't bring me absolute joy. And if I'm like, I started doing these videos last year on TikTok that were doing pretty well. And at first I did them for a month and I really loved it. And the second month it was like, oh, these are exhausting.
Yeah.
And then the third month I'm like, is this a job now? And then I was like, this is, and it takes courage to walk away from things too. Like sometimes you have to know the difference. You have to know when you're walking away because it's fear or insecurity, but you also have to know when you're walking away because you're getting all the signs that like, this is something that's starting to take away from you and not enrich your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, and as you get older, it's easier to see those signs and accept it, that like, okay, I can let this go. The world isn't going to end because I'm letting this go.
Also, clown for me was one of the things that happened, I'd say it was around 2017 when screenwriting, it's a long story, but I'll give you the truncated version. So
okay.
The reason I worked with a guy named JP Lavin, who's still a friend of mine, and we had sold a very cool spec, and I know the air quotes cool, but it was like, it had sort of a, it was like a kung fu thriller romance. Like it was a mashup of like 4 genres. And we ended up on the blacklist well before like it was like a website, when it was really like that secret list that producers made. And we had a bunch of years where we worked on very cool things, and I was very excited about it. The thing about working in mainstream screenwriting, cool things don't get made very often. Things that make sense to a marketing department get made. And so we were being hired to do all these cool genre bending scripts, and I loved it. And then there came a point where, and I think my partner even felt stronger about this, which is partly why I think I'm so happy for him. He's writing with his partner now. And I moved on, but we wanted to get something made. And so you start moving closer to the middle, to the center, and you go for more 4 tentpole projects and family movies and big intellectual properties. And somehow in all this just got derailed from like why I would take a huge risk and become a screenwriter in the first place. And it kind of culminated in that we sold a pitch and then wrote a script about a cell phone app called Fruit Ninja. Okay. Which is just a game where you slice fruit with your finger. And we had written a whole movie about this game that had no characters, no narrative. And we pitched it all around town, and it became this sort of I'll say cultish thing where, I mean, it's never happened to me before. We pitched this thing over 40 times.
Oh my
I
gosh.
think people just wanted to hear because they're like, how is this possibly a pitch? And the pitch was very
Yeah.
good. I'll say this, the pitch was very entertaining. I'm not saying the idea was good.
Yeah.
I think that's, but the pitch,
So people just wanted the show.
They wanted the show.
Like the show of the pitch.
And
yeah.
I was very much probably when we knew each other more, I was very much in like, I had really developed as a pretty solid performer. And like, I looked at it like a one-person show. You know, my writing partner would kind of stay on book and I was off book and I was doing voices. And so we sold it. And then, do you remember the Emojis movie?
Yes. Yeah.
So that movie came out just as we were kind of finishing our draft of this script. And the New York Times Magazine interviewed JP and I about this project because they were like, we want to do a story that kind of talks about these weird intellectual properties that don't seem like movies that become movies. And we did all these interviews with a really nice guy who, you know, I think looking back did the best he could considering what the article was about. But Emojis comes out and then this article comes out and basically the article is like, you can make a movie about any piece of crap thing. And, you know, but he's not wrong. Like when I read it, I felt like he was trying to say, hey, these guys are very talented, but they also realize that IPs are what sells and they no longer care about what movies they make. Like everything he said was true. And what happened with the Emojis movie was while it was a financial success, it was such a critical like turning point in that conversation about crazy things being made into movies. And and then our article comes out connected to it. There was also something, Jordan Peele had come out and said that he had quit acting because they asked him to be the poop emoji.
Yes. Yeah.
So like it was this storm and, the script goes into turnaround and New Line immediately. Like they're just like, we're not touching this script that we wrote.
Yeah. And
we were ice cold. Like things had already become harder because we were middle-aged men and we hadn't had a production and we weren't interesting, you know, like, and as people, right. You know, we just were trying to, but we couldn't like do anything to save our lives. We couldn't sell anything. We couldn't get into rooms. And that went on probably all through 2018. And finally, like at the end of that year, we had something very close at CW and then it fell apart for other reasons. Like we had kind of sold it. Mm-hmm. We had sold it actually in the room. And I was just like, if I can't get money for something I sell, like if things can still go wrong and I hate what I'm doing, I was just like, I just left. I just was like, I'm just walking away from this.
Yeah.
And I just fully committed myself to clown, performing and teaching. And I was like, let's just see if I stay true to the fundamentals of clown, which is like chase your joy, do what makes you happy, you know, like, you know, don't feel like you're never trapped in clown. Like what we do is we take down structures of power and authority. We break rules, you know, we do things our own way, like, and for laughs, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm just going to do that and see what happens. And so that's what I've been doing, I guess now for the last 4 years.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, there's like so many things that you said that I'm curious about, but the one thing, it's funny that you say that's like about taking down structures of authority, because one of the shows that you put on, which I think is the Stand Up and Clown, you kind of like are the authority in the show and you're kind of directing the clowning, right? I mean, I went to go see one of your shows at the Elysian Theater, like before the pandemic. Like Amber Largent was in it, and I can't remember who else.
Oh yeah, but I think it was the Lyric Hyperion.
Oh, the Lyric, yes, the Lyric, yes, it was at the Lyric, and like it was so funny because that you were kind of like just bossing everybody around. So that's interesting. Yeah,
well, you know, as a clown, you know, I present as like someone with authority, which I think is hilarious. Yeah. You know, because like I'm like driving a 16-year-old car. You know, like, but I look the part, you know, I'm like a bigger guy, you know, I'm bald, I have this gray beard. And so as my clown, like the fun of it is pretending to be the thing that stands between the audience and the fun and letting the clowns sort of take me down piece by piece and the show you saw at the Lyric Hyperion was, the building blocks of this show, Stand Up and Clown, now that I do at the
Okay.
Elysian, which is, has become really popular. I'm really grateful. Like, we've been selling out every month. And what I do is I get pretty well-known stand-ups and essentially bring them in, most of them having no clown experience. And then I improvise with them as the director, but the whole narrative is I'm going to show you how hard it is to be authentic. I'm going to show you how hard it is to do clown. And then the audience kind of cheers these stand-ups on for being brave and leaving their material behind and being silly and fun and taking chances. And like sometimes in clown, to break the structure, you have to be the structure in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. I don't know. I love it. I became like a super fan and super fascinated with you with the Jet Zone Ithmar. Because I was doing the whole Second City program back in 2017, 2018. And you have to go see shows as part of the curriculum. And I dragged my husband to a show, and he's not an improv guy, but he came with me. We made it a date one night, and he just like fell in love with you and
that's so sweet.
Juzo and Ithamar. And so I told him, he was like, you have to get Chad on the podcast. I was like, oh, I'm going to go for it. So he's so excited. And when I interviewed Ithamar, he was so excited.
That time was still, like I said, that was a time where I had this really rich creative identity at night and like had this crumbling writer identity in the day.
So what first brought you to clown? Because I know you also have a wrestling background. How do the two tie together? Did one lead to the other, or?
They tied back together. They were completely unrelated. I hadn't realized that they kind of scratched the same itch for me. I was in wrestling when I was in my 20s. I was an announcer, and everyone thinks because I'm do bodybuilding now and stuff like that, they're like, oh, you're a wrestler. I'm like, oh no, I'm so tiny compared to like actual pro wrestlers.
Yeah.
In this world, I'm big. But in that world, I'm nothing.
With all the little tiny actors.
Yeah, with all the little skinny drama kids. I'm a Hulk. So, I had this job and, did this announcing. And it was like also one of these things where it was for 3 years the most exciting thing that I'd ever experienced at that time in my life. And then for 2 years, as the company kind of collapsed, it was like sort of being trapped. It was like being trapped in an amusement park, being chased by zombies. It's like, oh no, I should be having fun here. How am I not having fun here? And then I thought that part of my life was over. And I came to LA to be a writer and had a couple little, I hosted a couple pilots and stuff because I was still, as an announcer, you're an actor, you're a performer, you're an improviser, mostly, because you're just reacting to the show. And at that time, it wasn't like it is now. They wouldn't tell you what was going to happen because they wanted these genuine reactions. So imagine all that training you get, just sort of react, because you have to, everything that happens is a big deal in wrestling. You can't just be like, well, that was okay. Everything's like, whoa. So you that's what improv should be, right? It's like everything's important. And truth be told, clown came to be because my partner had gotten sick and passed away. And I was 41 at the time. And then I was kind of rebuilding my life a little bit, and I went back to improv because I had been away for a little bit dealing with, all the stuff that comes with someone with an illness. And I took classes at iOS, and man, before this all happened, improv was scary. It was like, oh, I'm going up there. Oh, and also oh, we weren't the funniest. And then after going through sort of this cataclysmic event, it was just oh, this is trivia night. What do I care? I don't care if they like me. I don't care if they don't like. And so, but in that, the fear was gone and the fun wasn't quite there, because fear and fun, it's a very fine line, right? Between exhilaration and anxiety. So I was my answer was, I'll just do, and by the way, like I said, at this point, we're working on Flat Stanley movies and we're working on stuff that I really don't care about as for my job. And so at iOS, I met Juzo Yoshida. Yeah. And he was just so unpredictable. I didn't know at the time, but he's truly the most natural clown that you'll ever meet. He's legitimately gets everything wrong and everyone loves him. Yeah. He can do no wrong.
He's so sincere in all of his performance. It's brilliant.
and add on that he's, by the way, he would love you to think he's not, but he's like really brilliant. Like he went to like the best schools in Japan. He was a real estate sort of a high level real estate director here for years, like dealing with managing like huge buildings downtown. But he does speak English as a second language. And so take a guy who already is like so blunt and doesn't have like those social walls, and then has to speak directly because he's speaking in a second language. And I would watch him in class and he was the funniest guy. And so I was like, I want to play with that guy all the time. I was like, cause that guy's terrifying. Cause he will literally like, you'll come out and go, Grandma, what's going on? And he'll be like, grandmother, I'm your Shogun master. And like, it's like, okay, I guess. And so like, but I get a huge laugh doing this thing that like was completely antithetical to the rules. So we started playing together a bunch, and we were doing any show that would have us. When you're a duo, it's harder too, because they like the independent shows, rightfully so. They're like, well, we can bring a team of 8 people, and that means we have 8 audience members because these shows are not well populated.
Yeah.
And we play every show we could, and we kind of started building a little momentum because it was such a weird act. But it wasn't the weird act like that you knew in 2017. We were doing just 2-person scene work. We were very traditional.
Yeah.
And we kept seeing this group called Wet the Hippo they were from the Idiot Workshop. An idiot is a derivation of clown. It's essentially clown, but with a few changes and a little more bouffon and a little more performance art. And this group would go up, and they would either be the funniest thing in the show, or it would be such a disaster you couldn't stop talking about it. Like, but it was never like boring. Like so I was like, what are they doing? Because it was no scenic work. It was just all like weird characters and voices and weird games they'd play with each other. And I eventually kind of stumbled into one of their drop-ins, and that was my introduction. And then I was like, oh, so they see the audience, and their job is to commit to the dumbest ideas, and through the sheer force of will, get an audience on board. I'm like, that's what I need to do. And again, I get a reputation partly because I cultivate it, but I get a reputation that I don't like traditional long form improv and stuff. And it's not that. Here's my issue: is it does feel like it feels like you could go through the program. It's like you're getting it right now, and I don't think art shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
I'll say like maybe ballet or maybe like cello. Yeah, there's certain like clear metrics and standards, right? But not comedy. And you'd be in a class and something really funny would happen, and they would be like, that's great, but what you really did was you broke this rule. It would happen all the time, well, you know what, you said this, you looked at the audience, and then that, and I'm like, oh yeah, but that's what they like. Isn't it all about what the audience wants? Like if you can continue to break rules and they love it the whole time. So I was already kind of flirting with the ideas of clown. I didn't know it. And once I kind of bought in and started doing this work, that's when Jetso started doing costumes and I really let Juzo loose. So I'm like, Juzo, you can do whatever you want. We're going to break all the rules. And that's when it came to life, and we became popular and led to Jetso and Ithamar. I don't know if, I listened to Ithamar's episode. He didn't talk about me nearly enough for my taste.
Yeah.
For how good we are friends.
I mean, you basically made his career, right?
But we were doing so many shows. I had to find new ways to promote the shows, because it's like at the end of the day, you're still doing shows for the same essential audience. So I started inviting people to do shows with us, and we did shows with like Craig Kukowski and Dave Rosowski, and we would just invite the biggest people from Cook County Social Club members, and I think it was Carla Kukowski was like, oh, you have to do a show with Ithamar. You guys would get along. And we literally never met him till the day he showed up to do the show.
Oh, wow.
And we had such it was immediate chemistry. It was like, oh my God. And also all the I was super high status. Juzo was super low status. And then Ithamar was this sort of mischievous trickster in the middle, like who could get away with anything. And I was like, oh, it's so natural. And the way that show came to be, that you and your husband would go to see, is they had their first year of a diversity festival. And we did the diversity festival, And it was only the second time we'd ever performed. And we just had like a magic show. And I think the show in the main theater had sold out and we got all the runoff. So it was in one of the classrooms, but it was stuffed with people. And we were just running around. And Frank Coyote, I think it was Frank Coyote who saw us. Oh, no. Who was the artistic director? I'm thinking.
I want to, oh my God, his name is escaping me.
Is it Josh?
Not Josh. Yeah, I was like, it's a J. Josh Funk.
Josh Funk saw it and was like, it was just one of those like moments where like of serendipity is like, you guys want a show? And also, let's be honest, Ithamar was like the golden child. So they were like, do you want to do a show that Ithamar will agree to, that he doesn't have to do rehearsals for? And that's basically what happened. Is they're like, do you want to do a show where we can exploit Ithamar's popularity at the school? And I'm like, yes, I do. And and it was like, it was such a fun, it was the first time we'd ever had like a show like that. And, but yeah, like I was like, when things like that started to happen, already in my brain, I was like, I should be doing this. I don't know, like I'm not making any money. Like I can't support myself, but this is what I should be doing. How is that possible? Like, but then it seemed impossible. But what I found stepping away from writing, by the way, stepping away from writing, I wrote for a show last year, WGA job, like doing what I love, trying to do it at the highest level, trying to really identify my voice has led to more work than I was getting the last 2 years of me doing pitches, treatments, begging, knocking down doors. People come to me, and I'm not saying not every day. And like, there are huge gaps where it's like, but it's like, you don't need people to come to you every day.
Yeah, no.
And, but yeah, like, and for me, a big part of it was teaching, which I absolutely love. And because we're kind of talking to people who are over 40 and, I think sometimes as artists, we struggle with teaching because teaching can feel like, well, the actors that are good are working.
Yeah.
And it's like such bullshit. And it's such a, it's just something we do to ourselves. And it's like, oh, I agree. By the way, if you're doing it for money, it probably feels like that. If you're doing it because you really feel like you have something to offer, it's such a wonderful, enriching experience, and so now, I try to teach once a month at the very least. Like I'll do like an intensive for like 2 days with a class show, twice a month when don't have other work. And, that's become a huge supplement to my income. And then I kind of just wait, and people kind of reach out to me with little weird jobs, choreograph this little comedy thing. I do work for a company in Vegas called Spiegel World on occasion. They run a bunch of clown shows. And like, so now when I put all this energy into, I'm out there, Lisa, with like 20 somethings, and we're all like in a room putting costumes on. And that was like a big ego death for me. And I'm very grateful that for that ego death. But it's like, I look at all that stuff as like, oh, this is you continuing to put out there this thing that makes you unique. Like, this isn't like, cause you could be like, oh my God, how did this happen? Say middle-aged is generous. I'm 50. Like that's going to be a hell of a middle. But like, you go into these rooms and you're like, no, this is you being here and you still finding joy and you going out and playing and doing your best and not thinking about what it means or what society thinks. That's the truest freedom. Yeah. And just try to keep reminding myself, because there are days definitely where you're like, what's happened? What are you doing? Or like, no one's going to call. Like, no, you're doing all these shows and no one's going to, like, you think people are going to see, like, all those voices that we all have. And, and then I just kind of get up and do it again. And like, I'm like, but you're having more fun now at this age than you've ever had in your entire life. Like that will reap something. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And I think you have so much to offer. I mean, obviously I didn't know you in your 20s or 30s or whatever, but I would imagine you probably have way more to offer now than you did back then, but just because your life is so rich and all the experiences that you've gone through. And then, there's so much to say about you not doing it for the money and things coming in. Even for me, taking another full-time job this past year, it's kind of opened me up a little bit with my own art, because I'm not expecting the art to pay for my lifestyle or to pay for my kids or get my health insurance. It does make a difference when you're not putting that weight on your art.
Yeah. And, it's, like I said, you also have to be like, well, everything you gain is related to something you give up, and like being comfortable with that, like, that's why things have value. Like if you could have everything, then things would be valueless, So, when I was writing, I've lived in the same place for 11 years, but like I had a big 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. And like when I decided like, no, I'm going to do this art stuff, a friend of mine needed a place to stay. So like, I have a roommate at 50, like, it's like, guess what else? I also perform 20 times a month. I pay people to make me outrageous costumes, like I get to do all this. Like, it's like, you have to pay. You have you have to pay for it one way or another. And like, maybe it's, you have to get up at 5 a.m. to get certain things done, to open your day up. Like, like it's like fitness. It's like anything. It's like diet. It's like, to get a certain result, there's going to be sacrifice.
Yeah.
And looking at that sacrifice as also part of the pleasure of like feeling like, look what you're doing to allow yourself this. And instead of looking at it like a prison, it's challenging. But I mean, I really do feel so grateful to just, even when I'm having like some of the worst days or like a day of doubt and insecurity, and then I'm like, I go grab my box of props and stuff, and like I'm just, I'm like, oh, I get to have a bunch of people watch me do something I made up. Yeah. And like, and most of the time enjoy it. Most of the time, I'm not going to commit to full. It's pretty great.
Yeah. There's also, I just read something recently that was saying that the word discipline is like a derivative of disciple or something to that effect. And so that really resonated with me, because the idea of like, okay, so are you a disciple of, if you look at discipline, okay, I'm a disciple of myself. I'm a disciple of my art. Because I'm using discipline to make my art or to bring myself together in a different way. And that really kind of resonated with me, just because I've been trying to, especially with working full time and then having kids and having the podcast and wanting to still make art, I have to have so much discipline in my life to be able to fit it all in. But it's with the goal of like being a disciple towards the things that I want to live my life the way that I want, to bring the joy. And, some days it gets to be too much. This week was like pretty stressful and crazy, but at the end of the day, like I'm kind of having it all. I might not like get as much, free time, but that's okay, because this is the season of my life where this is what I have to do to get the things that I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding excitement in this process, it's all it's all process. Like I have so many friends now, younger friends who are, I would say from a society standard, certainly more successful, just like they're bringing in more money, they're getting better opportunities in terms of film and TV and this and that. And some of them are really grateful, and others are having much less fun than me. Like, it's like, we want these metrics to exist that like tell us if we're doing good. We want a pat on the head and be like, no, you're doing it. It's like, doing it is simply the act of pursuing art. Yeah. That's what doing it is. Doing it isn't like, oh, you're doing it. You had a guest spot on, at Law and Order SVU. That's like, that is the product of, auditions and work, but that's not doing it.
Yeah.
But it like to sort of think like this, you do have to go against everything, especially people from our generation, everything we were taught, everything we were taught about, like kind of lining all these things up and, a safe retirement and like, equity and property and like getting promotions and, your kids get into like we just keep creating all these markers that seem to make us feel more, I don't know, underwater than they do successful. It just seems like we create an impossible amount of things, potentially maybe to scare ourselves into not taking a breath and asking if there's another way, because
Yeah.
the society falls apart if that stuff doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, could that also, I wonder if it comes from, the generations before, right? So like not our parents, but our grandparents went through the depression in some way, shape, or form. And so they learned that like you have to save and you have to prepare because anything could be pulled out from under you at some point in time. And so that's what they then taught our parents. And then, so then that's like what was taught to us. And so like that's starting to fall away, that idea that like you have to be committed to an employer who's going to save you. And we're starting to realize is like that doesn't exist anymore, and the employer is just out for themselves.
Oh
And
yeah.
I mean, I've learned that. I spent so much time working for one employer, and as soon as they had the opportunity, they dropped me, no problem.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's all designed for the house to win. Like
yeah,
even like looking back at, I can't tell you, and I was one of the lucky ones. I was selling one or two things a year and making good money. But
yeah,
the way, even when you look as a screenwriter, I mean, the fact that these studios don't pay writers to pitch and write treatments, like they will just have someone work on
yeah.
something for 6 months. And then, by the way, you don't even necessarily know the person, if the person you're talking to is telling you the truth about the importance of the project. This could be just something they're trying to cultivate to make themselves look good to their boss. And the second something changes, they're like, oh, they hand you some line of BS. And like I've worked for people and found out that they didn't have rights to intellectual properties that they had me write
Oh
treatments
my
for,
gosh.
and they don't care. Like that level, like bosses don't care, companies don't care, employee loyalty does not matter. Like
No.
it's late stage capitalism. It's the way the world is. So you have to really advocate for yourself, and you have to make choices based on no one looking out for you. Like I don't mean to
Yeah.
sound dire about it, because I think there's a lot of freedom and joy in that. But yeah,
Yeah. I would agree with that because if you're not being if you're not putting all your eggs in this basket, and if you're not like dedicating all your time and energy to this person, they fail you, then you're going to be crushed. But if you're, I don't know, the job that I'm doing right now, it's a job, it pays the bills, we have an agreement, my boss knows that I audition, and if I were to book something I'd need to take time off. She knows that I have a podcast, and it's fine. But when I'm there, I'm doing my best for her. But now if something comes along, she knows that I need to take time off. If she turns around and fires me tomorrow, or I get laid off, I'm not going to be devastated, because I know, well, that's fine. That's just, this is a temporary thing. And I think if you look at everything as temporary, then you're not going to fall off such a cliff when the corporation does drop you, because eventually, the way I see it, I will. So, I have other things going on in my life that, well, may or may not, lead to something down the road. But even those things, you can't put all your weight in. You just have to, I'm sorry, I'm babbling. But my point is like all the things that you said is that you have to kind of do what's right for you and follow your joy. And then just trust that by following your joy, the things that are meant for you are going to come to you.
and I would even go one step further. Like find comfort in the fact, because it's scary to go outside of the system, but find comfort in the fact that the system has no obligation to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the things that you're kind of maybe leaning on, like, oh, well, I should do this, or I should put more overtime in, or I should try. And like you said, they answer to a higher power. Like they answer to stockholders, they answer to investors, they answer to the people making the most money at the top. You can do all that stuff and they still throw you out. Like, and I don't say this
Yeah.
as like in a way of like bitterness. I'm like, you just have to understand that security
Yeah.
doesn't exist, and it's okay, because we can always pivot. Like like I started this clown career at 41. I mean, I had
Yeah.
been an entertainer before that, and what I meant by wrestling coming back into it, I had sort of this, when I really did commit to doing this, I had this beautiful epiphany, and this kind of ties into the earlier part of our conversation, that I was like, oh, I was doing this for 5 years. I did thousands of hours of clowning, like this sort of, announcing stuff, and,
Yeah.
treating, because wrestling is ridiculous. It's like
Yeah.
men in their pajamas pretending to fight, and like silly characters, and I had to treat it with absolute seriousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just the job, so that's what I did. I didn't think about it. And now in clown, that's what I do. We present these very silly, fun ideas, and I think the reason I stand out is because I treat them with so much respect that kind of breaks the audience's brain. And I was like, oh, so all this stuff, and by the way, all the writing stuff, like even though I don't now sit and like work on, I wrote a couple specs over the pandemic because who didn't?
Right.
Like we all had time.
Yeah.
But like, now that I'm back into it, I write because I love writing, but like, yeah, like just sort of all that time I spent breaking stories and understanding structure, it makes me a very unique clown because a lot of clowns are so free, but I actually can see a picture. Like I can see a way to make a narrative even out of a not like even the shows we're talking about, the live directs you saw and the stand-up and clown show I do now, or Clown Zoo. We just had a Clown Zoo. This is the theatrical mass clown kind of ensemble that I don't run, but I kind of oversee because that's the way I like to say it. Because like we all have the same vote, but I do all the work. But we put on the show. We had some conversations over text. It was about Broadway, and we all just committed 100% and pretended that we had worked on the show for a month, and the show was dynamite. And people afterwards started asking us questions about like how many rehearsals, and I was just like. But I think part of the recipe for that show, besides the fact that the other performers are all excellent, is like all those years, those thousands and thousands of hours of breaking stories and understanding structure. I can be in the middle of a show and understand how to build the show. Like I can build the plane in the air. And so it's like, oh, all that time made me special. Like, so all these things, all these like starts and stops, I'm so grateful that I had two careers soar and crash.
Yeah.
Because that meant that 3 times in my life, I've had to start from nothing.
Yeah.
And I've had to use those muscles that we tend to like let atrophy when we get older, that beginner's mind stuff where you're truly open and humble and understand you don't understand. And like what I see with a lot of my friends now, even from high school, I say a lot, I'm sure a lot of them don't do this, but some of them do for sure, is you can get to an age where rigidity sets in and you're like, no, I've learned enough. I must know how things work now. And it's like, no, you don't, because the world's constantly shifting and changing, and you constantly have to approach life as if it is a mystery you're trying to solve. And the minute you start to think you get into that place of fear and insecurity and protecting what was and talking about how things were better back then. Things were not better back then. Nothing was better. It's just as wonderful and wonderful and terrible as it is right now. Always. And that's perpetuity through time. If anything, if you look at now and don't think from like just people having voices, like marginalized people having voices and being able to, even though they're still dealing with oppression and prejudice, at least now they can advocate for how you can say that this moment in time, just for that reason alone, isn't better than the 1970s or the 1980s or like post World War II. Like that's bananas. Like I don't know how you can even rationalize that argument.
Yeah. I think for middle-aged women, we have voices now in the television landscape that I think were not there before. I don't know. I was talking to my last guest. Like I think we probably have Tina Fey to thank for that because she's paved the way. But yeah, no, I agree. There is always going to be something that you can complain about. And in my 30s, I definitely went through this period where I started to become complacent, and I just felt like, okay, well, is this it for me? And I was going through a divorce at that time. And when I went through my divorce, I got into therapy. I started taking classes again. And then I would say probably as I got into my late 30s, that's when I started doing Second City. And now in my 40s, I just feel like a new mind again, realizing like, why did I ever have the idea that I was done or that anything was too late at this point in time? And I think there is something that can be really special about, like, if you do try to keep your brain fresh and you, if you do get to that, like, that attitude after the age of 40 where you're just, it's not that I don't want people to like me. I'm not putting my value on whether or not people like me. And I'm going to do the things that make me happy. And I'm going to do the things that bring me joy. And of course, I, have some responsibility to my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that. And I, will fulfill those responsibilities. But like, let's all get on board. And we are, as far as I know. But
looking around the corner and you're like, I think so.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Also I've come to believe it's like the minute you think you know exactly like what needs to happen in your life and like who you are, it's like also like partly when you turn the corner on death. like I feel like completion in life is death. Let's not fool ourselves. Like that is how it ends. So that's when life is complete, when you are no longer here. And so for me, it's like part of just staying young mentally and spiritually and physically to a degree is being like, I'm never done. I'm growing, I'm evolving, I'm changing, I'm learning. I like last year, I really focused all year on gratitude, and, like also like something like that, like 25-year-old Chad living in Philadelphia. If I had told my friends that I was focusing all year on gratitude, they'd have thrown me in the Delaware River. They would have thrown me in a knapsack and thrown me off the Ben Franklin Bridge. And this year, like it's compassion. It's like, yeah, like we have so much to work on. We have so many things outside even of our art or our aspirations. We have just so many ways we can be better partners to creative partners, better romantic partners, better parents, better friends, better people. And it's like, why wouldn't we just keep trying? And I understand why, because as you get older too, you start to feel like the world is moving faster than you can keep up with.
Yeah.
And so you sort of go, well, I guess then I'm just going to hit the brakes and pretend the world was better, you know, because I can't keep up, and we all know, like even with dumb technology stuff, like like, oh my God, my young friends, when they're like, airdrop me something, I'm like, okay, yikes. And they're like, are you iPhone 20? Why don't you have it? Why when you airdrop, why does it say iPhone 20? I was like, I didn't even know. I don't know. But like to sort of like laugh about it as opposed to being like, oh, things were better. I think in my screenwriting career, for sure, I should have left probably 3 years before I did. There was definitely a moment where I was like, oh, I don't like this anymore. By the way, I still enjoyed writing all day. It's fun. I enjoyed talking to JP, my partner, and breaking stories and being creative. And it was sort of that thing of like, well, this isn't the movie I would go see, but we still get to sit here and be creative. And so it wasn't joyless, but these compromises, constant compromises. And, you get to a point where it is, I remember like near the end, 3 months where we were working on a pitch for a Dance Dance Revolution movie. And I was like, I don't like this game. I don't like this. I don't like this idea. I would make fun of this. I would make fun of this movie if I saw an ad for it before a movie. And it was like, yeah, but this is what you do, right? This is your life. And it's like, I guess if I say it's not, it isn't. Like that's very powerful thinking. And a lot of things are set up to keep us from kind of going there because the whole, like I said, it feels like the whole system would fall apart. Look at the pandemic with just working from home. Yeah. I mean, they made it they told us it could never work. And like, why? No, I have to be in the, and it's like, nope, it was outright control. Yeah. And, and it's all like, this is all very matrixy, I guess, kind of talk, but it is like, question everything. Yeah. Question anything that is an obstacle in your life and brings you distress. Take a second and question it. I remember I heard about this mathematician once, and I say I heard about it because I only listen to books, so I don't want to say I read it. Only listen. I do not have any patience. I get it. But they were talking about how he was just like, are all like these sort of rules that were like the fundamentals of math. he's like, are these true? And he was like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to test them all. And he went through, and there was like a, not like enormous majority, but there was like a bunch of things that were just not true. Like they
Oh,
were just
wow.
mathematical sort of constants that people with PhDs would rely on
Yeah.
because they were told that. And he was like, no, this is actually off, sometimes by a little, sometimes significantly.
Oh my
And
gosh.
but isn't it easier? Like, don't we just want to believe things when we hear them? Because it's so much easier in
Yeah.
life to believe things because then you can keep moving
Yeah.
forward, you know?
Because when you try to go against the grain, it's hard and it's
Yeah,
work. And you're fighting with people and you're explaining yourself and you're explaining your thinking and you're explaining, I don't know, it just becomes so much mental load, and I think that's why people didn't push back for so long. And then, I think the pandemic changed a lot of that for a lot of people too. Is just that they're
so
tired of
much.
just they're just tired. I know, like, I'm in a mom's group with like a bunch of moms who we're all so tired
Mm.
of just taking it, and we're done.
Yeah.
A lot of our conversations are just like, we're done. We're not doing this. I know with my 3-year-old, I've already decided when she gets into kindergarten, man, if that teacher tries to give her homework in kindergarten, I'm going to say, no, we're not doing homework, because 5-year-olds shouldn't have to do homework. And
It's
I don't care
crazy.
what you say. Are you going to fail my kindergartner because you're giving her homework? Because with my first, they would give him homework, and I went along with it. And like now I'm like, why did I do that? That was stupid. It makes everybody's life hard. And that's just, I just say that as an example. But yeah, you're right. Like, pushing back, it's hard work and it's exhausting. But
And also, like, my dad right now is dealing with some medical stuff. And, I just had a long talk with him today, having gone through what I went through as a caretaker. And what he's dealing with is
hmm
much less, like, profoundly serious. But
hmm
I was like, don't be good little boys and girls.
yeah,
That doesn't exist to help you. That exists to help them. Like,
yeah,
like just in life, constantly asking yourself, wait, is this form of politeness? Is this form of etiquette? Is this form of courtesy or behavior serving me or them?
hmm
And being in that constant state of questioning things, you're right. Like, it's tiring. But no, it's
hmm
even more tiring being trapped in a construct that you think will reap one result, and in fact reaps an opposite result over and over and over again. That
yeah.
is exhausting.
And then you wake up 5 years later, 10 years later, and you're like, what did I do?
What happened?
Why? Yeah. Why did I waste all this time? Oh, yes. Yes, 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 yes.
But this is clown
Okay.
though, Lisa. Like, that's the thing. Like, there's like, clown is the first thing. Like, I feel like I'm a very good writer. Like, I feel like
hmm
I wrote things I'm very proud of. I continue to write things. I feel like I'm a good actor. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen better actors for sure. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, you're doing something I'm not doing.
Yeah. I get
I'm
that.
a good dancer. I'm not a great dancer, but like, I'm a great clown. And,
hmm
and I think the reason is because the tenements of clown that make it work are the ways I want to live my life. Like,
hmm
you can't separate my art from me in that regard. And like, I'm
hmm
speaking my truth when I talk to students, when I perform. It's like, this is how I want to view everything.
Yeah.
And there's like this beauty and simplicity in that, even though some of the choices that you have to make to be true to that ideal are hard. It is nice to have like fundamental beliefs that you
Yeah.
feel, by the way, bring joy to the world and make the world a better place and make your life better.
Yes. I think that's super important. For me, I spend a lot of the time, I think, in my 20s and 30s, like feeling like I feel like I'm supposed to be like a healer, or I'm supposed to, like, bring joy to people, like definitely like some kind of healer aspect. And when I was trying to figure out how to go back to work, because I didn't want to go back into property management, I ultimately, that's the job that I'm doing right now. But that's okay. It's humbling,
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm never going to do it. And so now it's like, okay, I had to humble myself and realize, like, this is what you got to do right now. And that's okay. But when I was working with a career counselor, all the things that, like, they have you go through all these different steps. Like, what are the things that interest you? What are the things and it was all like healing type of things, or connecting people, or like, like if it was like therapy type of stuff, connecting people, um, building structures, and like, or like physical, like massage type of stuff.
Mhm.
And I think for me, I seek to do that with my art, or even like, that's what, to me, with this podcast, is connecting people and making people feel less alone with whatever, wherever they're at in their journey.
Yeah, that's a beautiful
Yeah.
sentiment. Yeah.
Well, I know we're going to run out of time, and I got to ask you my 2 questions that I ask every guest.
Okay.
What advice do you have for anyone who is looking to change careers, or maybe young people who are coming up in their art, trying to figure it out?
I would say, boy, there's two very kind of different things, right? Because when you get older, it does feel different when you change careers. And I've changed many careers. I have been drummed out of many careers and started over. I know change sounds like there was more agency on my part.
Yeah.
I would say with young people, fall in love with the feeling something gives you, as opposed to the idea of what this thing represents. So if you're young and you sort of have an idea of like, well, I'll be a doctor, I'll be respected, I'll have a big house, like that isn't how you feel. Maybe you'll love doing medicine and it'll make you feel wholehearted and great. But like, know the difference between, I'll real quick, I do this exercise in my clown class, and it's called good idea, best idea, worst idea. Okay. And I have these clowns come up and they can't say anything, but I say, I want you to do the thing that you think will either has the best chance of making us love you or the worst chance. I said, but either or, I really want you to commit to it. Like you are trying to be loved. So if it's the worst idea, you better really attack this. Like really, I don't want to see you like accept that this bad idea cannot work. This is the idea you have to work with.
Yeah.
And then they go up and they do it. And then I ask the class, was this their best idea or was this their worst idea? And I can't tell you how many times the audience thinks the opposite is true, or the audience is split down the middle. And because like we put such value in like our unconstructed thoughts and ideas, like, you just hear someone, like when I hear like an 18-year-old go, I really want to be an accountant. I'm like, okay, maybe. I was like, do you have any idea what you want? Do you even know what you want to get from Chili's tonight?
Yeah.
Like, but you're going to, and I think you have to take things from an experiential point of view. Like what makes you feel good? What brings you joy? What makes you sad? Like value that over the idea of what you think something represents.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. This is
a deep one, huh? This is a deep one.
Yes, I wish I had another hour with you, Chad. You bring so much energy, and I think this is
better than Ithamar's episode for sure.
Oh yeah, Ithamar.
He phoned it in.
You bring so much energy to life in general. You like have, I don't know, I'm going to speak for you and I'm sorry if I get it wrong, but it just feels like you have like so much passion for what you do and just for life in general. And that reads on the stage and the way that you approach everything. And you've basically said as much on the podcast. And so, we just like hit the ground running. And I have the one last question for you, but I just want to share that like, this has been like, oh, so great to have your energy in this virtual studio. Because I feel like you really bring it with like so much of what this podcast is about. And you have so much to say and you're so smart. And like I said, just like good energy and good vibes.
That's so sweet. Positivity. Thank you. And I'm 10 years over the cutoff for this podcast, which I think should be mentioned.
There's no cutoff. It's just like after 40. So, one of my guests, she was 73. So,
Oh, I saw that in the listing. I was curious about that one.
Yeah. Bunny. She was awesome. Okay. So my last question is, what does making it mean to you now versus maybe when you were younger? So like, what does success look like to you?
And this is like, again, I can't stress enough. I have certain privileges in my life that allow this, but honestly, I kind of just look at like what my next few months look like. Like I've kind of tried to step away from like, if I get like I said, I had this writing job. I got my health insurance back last year. It was so exciting, but I really fight the urge to be like, oh, and now this year I'll get a second writing job. Like I kind of look and go, are my days packed with things that are challenging, exciting, joyful? Like I really I really do feel like if you must be in the present. Like success is being able to enjoy the present moment, even if it's struggle.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, when I say that, it doesn't mean like all like trips to Anaheim and vacations and like, cause there's stuff that like I'm, working on personal stuff, like working on myself that I find arduous, but I know that like they have value. And so like for me, making it means that like, one, that you feel like you are plotting your future in a way that packs your days with things that bring you joy and fuel your passion, and that you believe in your vision for the future, that when those days aren't great, or when you have a bad week or a bad month, that
Mm-hmm.
there's still an optimism and a positivity that tomorrow I can turn this around. Like if I'm in that space, that's making it. So
Yeah.
it's not a finish line. Making it is sort of finding this sort of general energy of
Yeah.
forward momentum where like even when it's bad, I believe in the journey that I'm on. And
Yeah.
like if and like I said, sometimes that journey goes dark places, but like I still believe in what I'm
Yeah.
doing, and I still believe in how I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, I myself have had some pretty dark places in my own life, and like when you get through them, it really makes you appreciate what you do have, and it makes you appreciate the life that you're able to live now, and the people who are still around there with you. And the grief doesn't go away,
Oh,
the pain doesn't go away, but you can use that to fuel you, like to enjoy the moments that you do have.
I mean, I think one of the hardest truths to embrace, because sometimes it feels like, like I said, I lost a long-term partner,
Yeah.
in a very like grueling 18-month episode,
Yeah.
and had to start all over. But it's like, if you can become at peace with the idea that the darkest moments of your life have allowed you to enjoy the brightest moments of your life, and not be angry or shameful, to sort of appreciate bad luck and appreciate bad experiences, like, because I think
Hmm.
that's the challenge, right? Because sometimes,
Right.
loss of a parent, like something happens and it's like, oh, for me to feel there's any value in this at all is like somehow like like it's somehow an insult to this person or this thing, like, you know what I mean, like.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not how life works.
Yeah.
Experiences, like, if you really hurt and you really have dragged yourself up from like falling out and like survive these things, and can find joy and appreciation in knowing that you did that, and that the things you're enjoying now are sweeter and better and brighter,
Hmm.
there's no other way to live,
Yeah.
and I can remember, I can close on this. I can remember early on, after my partner passed, meeting with someone at iOS who had lost their even much more tragic situation, in the sense that he had lost his wife in childbirth.
Oh God.
So now was a single father and
Yeah.
lost, and this had been years for him. And I had only been like, I was like maybe 6 months removed from my situation.
Yeah.
And, and he was just like, I'll never love again. There'll never be anyone as great as this person. Like, and I can remember even like in the state, because it took years for me to get my brain back in order, just like my brain
Hmm.
chemistry to return. I
Yeah.
knew, and we were at, was it 24 Cafe near iOS? Do you remember that place? Something
Uh,
24. It's like a little diner.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like, so we had these like shishi little meals in front of us, and he's going
yeah.
off on this like really dark. And I remember even then I was like, this can't be right.
No.
I was like, this can't be right. And God bless him. I think he really was like trying to prep me for a future that looked like his future. And by the
Right.
way, I should say also that that guy eventually moved on from that way of thinking.
Yeah.
And like, but like, it's like, oh no, now I've, now that I've seen how valuable life is, I now owe it to myself and to anyone who's ever cared about me who's here or not, to live as robustly as possible. Like otherwise, that's the insult. The insult is not really embracing and chasing your joy. That's how you dishonor the past.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for this is a lovely podcast. I think you're doing a great thing. And I think there's a lot of people who get to this age and start to wonder if like the best of things has passed, and it's absolutely not true. And like,
not at all.
That this is like, you can opt to do that.
Sure.
Certainly you can opt out of happiness.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I can say it now, I feel more fulfilled now than I've ever felt in my life. And in a lot of ways, my life is as hard as it's ever been, but I feel more fulfilled, and I'm more excited about what I'll learn next right now than any other point in my life. Yeah.
And for you, it was following your joy and not, instead of following like your quote unquote dreams, which were society's dreams, right?
Yeah.
I think that makes a big difference. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much for giving me your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I had a great time. Thank you, Lisa. It was nice seeing you again too.
It was good seeing you.
Many years, yeah.
I know. I had so much fun performing that. My little cat Steven. See, I actually recorded it. I want to put it out like I did like in a studio type of thing because I wanted to like do a YouTube video, and then I never edited it together because I was like, wait, I don't know if I can put this out there because I got to get music rights and stuff.
But now you can for sure with like TikTok and all that. Like it's like the Wild West with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But where can people follow you?
I'm at the Chad Damiani on Instagram. I also have a link tree that I list most of my shows, which is just like my name, Chad.Damiani on Linktree, which you can also find on my Instagram. That's basically where I live mostly on social media.
Yeah.
I'll come see a show, take a class, say you're a friend of Lisa's. Like we'll do it like a speakeasy. Just be like, I'm a friend of Lisa's, and I'll know what that means.
I need to come do one of your classes because I think clowning is calling me. It's too much fun to,
We are having a good time. We're having a pretty good time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll talk soon.
Take care, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode. You can follow Chad on Instagram at @TheChadDamiani, and there you can see all of his upcoming shows and classes. And don't forget to check out his podcast, Stand Up and Clown. It's really good. I started listening to it after our interview, and I've really enjoyed it. All of this is linked in the show notes, by the way, to make it easy for you. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. And please be sure to share the show on Instagram. Share it with your friends. Word of mouth is the best form of marketing. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MakingItAfter40, the number 40. And to catch up on what I'm doing when I'm not podcasting, check out my Instagram at Lisa Rodriguez. Thank you all for listening and have an excellent week.